You took Blake's deposition, right?
I did.
So how'd that go? Did you score points? Can you give us some overview? I'd like to say welcome to Two Angry Men, but we got three today.
We not only have
three for the price of two.
And isn't Bryan the OG? Wasn't the first guy on the Two Angry Men?
Bryan was the first guest on Two Angry Men. Bryan Freedman, the great lawyer who represents somebody that we are going to talk about right now. He represents Justin Baldoni. And Blake Lively is now saying to Justin Baldoni, cough up $161 million for smearing me, ruining my acting career, and ruining my business. And that doesn't even get into the damages she said she suffered for what she claims is sexual harassment on the set. So, Bryan, I'm just so curious how you received the latest filing from Blake Lively that the smear campaign cost her that kind of dough.
Well, since there was, we obviously have detailed pretty well that we don't believe there was a smear campaign. We're not surprised at anything we see in this case. It's been quite a whirlwind of a case. But we're pretty happy with what the evidence has shown so far, and we feel good about trial. We feel excited about going to trial. And I always talk about in every case, sometimes you want somebody to want an outrageous amount of money. Sometimes that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
I have a question, and I have not, just even though in full disclosure, you and I are very close. I haven't talked to you about this, but I have a sneaking suspicion. There's been a lot of reporting, and I know this may surprise you, Bryan, but I don't think accurate reporting, that there was a deadline that was missed. Are you able to talk about that? Because I have a theory on what really happened.
Well, we should just say this involves the dismissal of Justin Baldoni's countersuit.
Sure. There were no deadlines that were missed. We're always glad when that doesn't happen. I'm not really sure.
Yes, so is the malpractice insurer usually.
Exactly. And I'm not sure how anybody even thought that a deadline would be missed. Before anyone can file an appeal, there needs to be a final judgment. In order for there to be a final judgment, the judge has to actually issue a final judgment. And then there's a certain amount of days that you have after that to go ahead and file a document called a notice of appeal. In this case, the judge actually didn't issue a final judgment until just a few days ago, but also reserved that final judgment from being really appealable until after the judge rules on the attorney's fees motion. So there's going to be some time until you could even possibly file a notice of appeal. And people talk all the time about, well, why didn't they amend again? Why didn't they file a new complaint or an amended complaint? And if you're familiar with standards of appeal, sometimes you don't do that because you have a better chance of winning on appeal based on a dismissal of the first complaint rather than a subsequent complaint that you might amend.
So
let me translate that.
Do you intend to appeal?
I think that we intend to take a look. Timing is everything, right? I mean, look at Mark's grandchildren now. I mean, timing is everything. Do you intend to appeal? Well, where will we be when the time for appeal comes? Right? I expect that where we'll be when the time for appeal comes is we will be victorious after we win at trial. And then, the clients will make a decision about whether to appeal or not. If you were to ask the question today, they may have a different answer than they have then. And it just, it just depends really where their headspace is at that time. I will tell you this, the case has always been about, was there sexual harassment? Case has always been about, was there a smear campaign? That's really as simple as it is. And so, trial will tell. A jury will make that determination factually, and we feel really confident that we're going to get the right answers to both those questions.
And by the way, Bryan and Harvey, the idea that was put out there, and I know what that is. Talk about spin. That came from the Blake Lively camp, that there was a deadline that was missed, trying to portray this as some kind of a legal victory when literally it focuses and like a laser onto the claims. And by the way, if you have followed this, and Harvey, I don't know anybody in the media who's followed this more closely than you have, everything that Bryan has developed so far that I've seen, and I'm just looking from the outside in, I'm not involved at all, but everything I've seen, all of those claims have been basically debunked. So why even get into the other stuff? Because boy, if Bryan is successful, if Baldoni is successful, the turnaround, the consequence at that point is unbelievable.
By the way, this episode of Two Angry Men is sponsored by Incogni. It's shocking to find out how much of your personal information ends up online. And this, by the way, is not by chance. Data brokers and people, search sites, they collect your personal information like your name, your address, your phone numbers, financial information, your income, and they sell it. And then it's publicly revealed without your consent. Incogni is here to put an end to that. It's like a digital hitman for your data. It will hunt down these shady websites and then poof, the information is gone. So I don't know about you, but I get all sorts of spam in my email, robocalls. I get dozens of robocalls every day. And what Incogni can do is it can remove the data before it ends up in the hands of scammers. Plus, if you care about the law like we do, you probably value public records and transparency. The issue is that legal information that's used to be accessible in context is now scrapped by data brokers and repackaged and sold. And that can affect hiring, insurance, and even search results. Now, Incogni uses privacy laws like GDPR and CCPA to contact data brokers to request removal of your information from commercial databases. Now, giving you full control over how your name appears online, because legal systems should protect your rights, not turn your past into profits. So, you can get 60% off annual plans at incogni.com/angry with code ANGRY at checkout. It's risk-free. Incogni offers a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied. Live free from dangerous spam with Incogni. That's incogni.com/angry for 60% off annual plans. Bryan, I'm so glad we're able to talk because I've really wanted to talk to you about this. So your client is definitely winning the TikTok war. And I don't say that lightly because that's a really important war, because that's his audience. And those are the people that are going to go to the movies and that are going to watch his stuff and watch her stuff. And he's winning that war. Even with the dismissal and everything else, he's winning the TikTok war. But legally, if this thing goes to trial, I mean, it just feels like you're going to watch the rubble bounce on both sides because, you know, she'll make claims, he'll make claims. It's going to be he said, she said. And, you know, it doesn't feel as clean as Johnny and Amber, where he ended up with that decisive victory. It just feels like this case, my gut has been telling me, and I feel like maybe I'm wrong now, that this is just not going to go to trial because it's in nobody's interest. It's going to settle somehow.
I think that, people have been saying that for a long time now. And I think when you have a case that involves the issues this case involves, sometimes the only way to resolve it is trial. I see that look, people are really dug into this case. and rightfully so. And I think it's an important case for everyone. It's an important case, frankly, for society, in an unusual way. But I think the case does go to trial. I think the case has to go to trial. I think that it has to go to verdict. I think that from Justin Baldoni's standpoint, who, by the way, I've now known him for almost a year. Um, Incredible man, like incredible. Not like a good person, an incredible man, truly. And I just think that he has to go to trial and let a jury of his peers decide. Do these facts rise to the level of sexual harassment? Was there a smear campaign that he participated in? Those kinds of things. And to clarify, like smear campaign, there's not really a cause of action, right?
I was going to say
It's
smear campaign is.
Well, it's sort
is
of defamation. I mean, it really it boils down to if somebody is telling the truth about somebody, there's not really a cause of action. It's a smear based on false facts, it seems.
Well,
Yeah, you'd have to narrowly get into the issues of those things. You'd also narrowly have to get into the issues of retaliation, right? And was there retaliation, and what was the retaliation, and what was the temporal proximity and things like that give rise to it. But look, I just think that this, who you are can truly come out in a trial, and Justin is a fantastic person. And I think that people will be able to see and hear him for the first time in a year.
You took Blake's
By-
deposition, right?
I did.
So how'd that go? Did you score points? Can you give us some overview?
I don't think I'm allowed to talk about that.
But
I
what
was
about
gonna
what about
say
what
he's-
about broadly? Are you satisfied that what you got out of that deposition could torpedo her claim of sexual harassment?
I mean, I think broadly, I can just say this, that I'm really, really looking forward to the trial. It's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of noise about the case. Some of the most difficult parts, I think, about hearing about the case in the media has been mainstream media and how mainstream media has treated the case. And if you look at it, and you really kind of zero in on it, there are a lot of reasons why mainstream media has taken this case and twisted the words and misrepresented what's really been going on in the case. And it's done that in part because there are, big time, powerful, important relationships with certain people and certain media, that's owned by, very few people in this town. And that's why when you talk about the TikTok people, they're not really my people. They're your people. They're everyone's people. They're the people, right? They're the jurors.
And by the
And
way, you just hit exactly what I was going to say. I'm sitting here hours from when a mayoral candidate did what, if you had predicted this 8 or 9 months ago, would have been unthinkable, where this city also, the jury did in the Diddy case something that people thought was unthinkable. And by the way, the canary in the coal mine in both of those cases, both of those instances or phenomena happen to be what you've characterized, Harvey, as the TikTok kind of the finger on the pulse. I'll characterize it as I think, or Bryan has called it mainstream. I just call it legacy. I just think the absolute gulf between mainstream legacy and what's really happening has never been shown more clearly than what's been going on in New York in the last 8 months.
But Bryan, I'm interested in what you said, that you think mainstream media, it sounds like what you're saying is they haven't given Baldoni a fair shake. From my seat, it feels to me like, I mean, I certainly know on our side, Blake is taking lots of lumps.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. Um, I really haven't seen that. What I've seen is things misconstrued, for example, on TMZ itself. You saw, you saw it on TMZ, they said that deadlines were blown, and Justin has walked away from the appeal. He's walked away from his case. He's fine with the fact that the case was dismissed. That was on TMZ.
Yeah, no,
That was not true.
we messed that up. I agree with you. But that wasn't. Look, we're not going to say something that we know is not true because it's ultimately going to get corrected. We messed that up.
Well, you're definitely not going to say that you knew that it was untrue and said it. That's for sure.
Well,
There's Brian. There's Brian defining. There is defining malice.
Brian,
there.
Brian, I will say this: we corrected it, right? There's
Yeah,
no,
you know what the problem
it
is,
doesn't
Harvey?
it doesn't serve us to put a story up that we end up correcting. We screwed that up, and
Well,
I just agree with you. I agree. with you.
You may have screwed it up actually, because what you may have done is you may have read Deadline.
No.
Which
And by the way,
that way too.
if you want to talk about us, I felt he's been winning this all along. I mean, we talked about that as early as today. That personally, and I've talked about this on television. We've done stories on this on the website. I feel like Justin Baldoni is winning this. I think this really has hurt not just Blake Lively, but it's also hurt Ryan Reynolds. And so, I'm just telling you from my seat, I'm not seeing this as, oh, wow, Blake's winning this thing at all, even though her lawsuit is still the active one right now. I'm not seeing it that way.
I can't really judge, at all, like who's winning or not.
Well,
Because
I'm basing it on just the way it's being received by people. When you
Right.
see, for example, the unedited dance that became a big part of this case, that the way it's been received is her view that this was uncomfortable and harassment and whatnot wasn't landing. So I'm just looking at pieces of the case that have come out, and the Taylor Swift element of the case has been devastating for Blake Lively. And I'm talking
Yeah.
about in terms of public perception. So, yeah, in terms of who's taking the lumps, Taylor Swift, the unedited dance, and other things, it seems to me it's been Blake Lively.
I look at it a little different. I haven't seen it that way, probably because I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, what's the jury verdict going to be? That's what matters. It's really ultimately what matters to Justin Baldoni as to whether he's going to be able to work again. It matters, as to Jamie Heath. It matters, as to Melissa Nathan. It matters as to Jen Abel. It matters as to all of the people that have been sued in the case. And I think that when we talk about, Harvey, in 6 months from now, we won't talk about lumps, or we won't talk about who's winning or who's losing. We'll have a verdict. And
It's funny you say that, because remember, the run up, we only have collectively as a society a very short memory, but remember the run up to Johnny Depp. And by the way, in the verdict in that case, they both got verdicts, but his verdict dwarfed hers. And so I always say Brian's kind of viewpoint here makes the most sense. If you're a trial lawyer, one of the complaints I always have is that trials have now become kind of ESPN like in terms of who's winning first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. What do you got to do in the fourth quarter? So it's ultimately, as a trial lawyer, it's what happens in the end.
Can I just throw something at you, Brian? We talked about this today on the show. I have a feeling you're going to disagree with me on this, but we are in the position where we get contacted by publicists all over all over entertainment. And it's just been funny to me that each side has been saying, we're clean, the other side isn't. Both sides have been doing this stuff. And I know it because I've been the recipient of those phone calls, among other people in my office. And what occurred to me today when I read that Blake Lively was saying she's incurred $161 million in damages because of a smear campaign, that there's a principle in the law called unclean hands, that if you claim somebody else did you dirty but you did them dirty the same way, a pox on both their houses. And I wondered that could this case just end up where the jury just says, I don't want to hear from either of you guys, you both were doing that, case to, you end up getting the verdict because the jury just doesn't want to give money to anybody because both people were playing the game.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that relates to this case. I can talk generally as I understand what a publicist does, right? I think publicists call, reporters and news outlets all the time to make sure that a story is correct or to make sure that their client's side of the story is heard. I mean, I think that's kind of normal operating procedure. I think it's rarely the case where a publicist would call up and say something that was completely
Oh
untrue.
my
But
God.
even more rare, right? Even more rare, Harvey, would be when a publicist would call up something that was completely untrue, and the reporter would say, "Okay, great. Let me write that down and let me just put that on the air right away." I mean, every single news outlet that I know does their own homework, does their own research in any situation. I don't think that trust, while it's an important factor, it's not the level or the duty, or the line in which you draw. You would go around, you'd make calls and make sure that things are correct of whatever you're hearing. And I don't mean that specifically to the Baldoni case at all. I just mean it to any story. Something pops up, you call up, you ask a question, and then you verify what that information is so you make sure you get it right.
Okay, so now you want to know the way it really works?
Sure.
They spin more than a dreidel, number one, that they are not just giving you facts. They are calling you with a spin that they want to put on for their client, and they feel that's their job. So we get this. I mean, I've
Do
got
you
literally thousands of calls from most every publicist, and every publicist can take a set of facts and shade it or change it, and they do it all the time. And what they
since
do,
you
well,
since you know
let,
that
let, me,
though,
let me just give you this. And
sure.
what they'll do cleverly is they'll say, we have sources directly connected to, and and listen, we've gotten things where we wouldn't put it up, but it ends up somewhere that they know they can get it somewhere, and they choose, in ranking order where they want to go, but they know they can get it out. And once they get it out somewhere, it just gets picked up. So that's the game. But I'm telling you that publicists are not calling and saying, "Let me just tell you the factual basis." They are
Let,
they are lobbying everybody, and sometimes just with false information. A
so
lot, a lot.
so let me ask you a question. Since you know that to be true, when a publicist calls you up, you're not just going to take what they say and say, okay, this is true, I'm going to put it up the way they are. You're going to go out and try to verify the story,
Yeah,
since you know that.
but they can listen. And sometimes I'm not saying they always do things that are unverifiable. That's not true. And sometimes what they tell you is from their side, and they'll make an allegation that really hurts the other side, but they can get it out there. Now, if you're a news outlet and they make that kind of allegation and you call the other side and they just don't want to comment or whatever, and a lot, and it has to be case by case, but those things get out. And whether they get out by us or somebody else, they get out. And when you talk about getting frustrated with bad information, we've seen things that are just crazy that get out there. And I'm not saying we're immune from it at all. I'm not acting like a knight, in shining armor here, because I admit to you, we screwed up the appeals story. I absolutely admit that to you. So I get it. But I am telling you, it can be a really dirty business, the business
Right.
of
And
publicists.
right. I understand that. But if that's the case, and reputable outlets, whether it be TMZ, whether it be Deadline, whether it be any other publication, they would know that that's what happens, and they would want to make sure before they put out their own story that that story is truthful and accurate, or as accurate as it can be.
And you want to know the truth, and this is the dirty little secret. Yeah, you're right, but guess what they're looking for? They're looking for content. Because if you don't put content up, you don't have a business. So then the question becomes, when is the content verifiable? And it depends on the outlet, and even within the outlet, the people who are working on a story, on what happens with that. And there are some outlets that play much faster and looser than others. And in our climate, you get something up somewhere and it gets picked up everywhere. So they know that game. And that's the way it works. And yeah, maybe they'd prefer it to be, say, on TMZ than, I don't know, another place that they're thinking of. But if we won't do it, they'll go to the next place and the next place, and they'll eventually get it up somewhere. And we see this all the time, Brian. All the time.
Let me ask you a question. How did you get the story wrong about the appeal?
Well, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus in my office. So
I don't want names. I just assume somebody called.
I'm gonna.
Well,
I'm gonna
no, I know. And here's the thing. I think it was analyzed wrong. I think it was just analyzed wrong. I don't know all the specifics, but I know kind of how this thing worked. And when I got involved in this thing, it became apparent that our story was wrong. And what my goal was at that point was, you got to make a correction if we're wrong, and tell me if we're wrong, and let's figure it out. But
you know what the problem is?
It was just not analyzed right. It wasn't. I think the counting of it, Brian, in terms of the final judgment, I mean, this is what I think, that wasn't calculated in this. It was more when whatever that was filed, that was the countdown stage. I think that was it. I think that's what would happen here. That they didn't count.
I'm gonna come to your defense, Harvey.
Well, I'm not asking for a defense.
I think what happened is somebody in the overnight crew.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
You go to bed. You're in
There's
bed
not.
with my toddler.
Okay, stop it.
And then you're asleep, and then somebody posts
like
it.
I said, we get most things right. I mean, we just do. And we're really vigilant. We have lawyers, we have researchers, we have producers, we have a lot of steps that we go through. We are not immune from mistakes. But what I'm saying to you is that, generally, when you want to talk about a publicist calling and spinning a story and talking about, I have a source, I'm connected to this story, you can base this on sources connected to so-and-so, they'll get that up. They will get that up.
But you guys run it by your lawyers.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. You don't just put it up automatically.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
also,
I can't tell you, what the percentage is.
But calls.
Yeah, I mean,
you make calls to people.
How many times do I call you, Geragos?
I mean, I know that. And you sit there and you say, what about this? What about this? And I keep, no.
We did that today. We did that today.
I know.
And so, on a story we were working on. And so,
for the phony story that Ciroc planted about Diddy.
It wasn't Ciroc. That's hilarious. But no, we talked, we had 4 or 5 phone calls today on that story before we put it up. So, and we didn't confirm it with you, we confirmed it elsewhere. So, yeah, I mean, you don't just do it, but Brian, you got to realize that these publicists will call and they will couch things in sources and say, look, you've worked with me before, and there's no way of knowing who that source is if they say it is a source directly connected to so-and-so, that they will get that story up somewhere. It may be that some outlets say, no, that's just wild, we need some verification. They will get it up somewhere every time. They know exactly how to do this, and oftentimes they play dirty.
Right, and then if they place it anywhere, then the more reputable ones will say according to, and that gives them their 1 degree of separation, which is awful.
Well, you're not wrong. You're not wrong there.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes when you get a story out there and the story's wrong, you wonder why there's not enough of other people and the other side of the story saying, hey, I'd like you to come out and say that story was wrong and how that story became wrong, because that's not correct. And you don't get as many people correcting the story that was spread when it was first put out there.
Okay, I'm going to give you. I'm going to play your game here because you are right on the. Again, I'm not going to dispute the appeal issue. There have been numerous times, and Bryan, I'm not saying this as a criticism because I know you have reasons for it, but you know this, that there have been numerous times that I and others in my office have texted you and you haven't returned the texts. And it happens a lot where you will not return our texts. And I've made phone calls to you, I've texted you, Jamie, my news director, has done the same, and others as well. So sometimes you get a tip on one side and you try and verify it with the other side, and you don't even get a no comment, you just don't get an answer. And you know that's happened because you and I have been involved in that together. Now, you may have your reasons for not wanting to get back to me, and I understand that. But when you talk about, is there a lack of trying, at least with us and you, I think you've seen it.
Oh no, I of course, you know, and you're excellent at it, and you always do that. That's why you get stories first, and that's why you've been so successful in your career. I sometimes don't get back to you because I could be in court. You know, my wife, by the way, my wife and I have had this very conversation about getting back to her. And I've had it with other people also, because you know, I feel like I could sit there with my phone and do nothing else other than respond to texts and emails, and the day will end, and I will have done nothing but that. So if I'm in a meeting, if I'm at a lunch, if I'm, you know, if you know, if I'm in a deposition, if I'm in court or anything else, there might be an actual legitimate reason I'm not responding, or I might actually be writing a brief. And certainly, as you've seen the activity in this case in particular, you know, we might be working pretty hard to keep up and do our best to actually prove that you know, the truth.
And I get that, but I guess the point I'm making, this is not about it's not about you. It's generally that, you know, with you, I get it. And there are different reasons, but you know, we make efforts all the time to contact you. And,
Right.
and the interesting thing to me, and this is the thing we laugh about in my office, that when there is a crisis sometimes where a publicist is representing a client, where we have a story that we really need a reaction to, they run for the hills, that they literally turn off their publicists, turn off their phones, will not respond to emails, will not respond to texts, and they think by closing their eyes, that's the solution. So when they're needed the most, and this happens, Bryan, I'm telling you all the time, that when they're needed the most, they go radio silent on you. So when you wonder, how do stories get out where you don't get the other side, or it seems skewed or false or whatever else? You got to see what's behind that curtain. And this happens all the time with a lot of publicists, that when there's any heat, they run for the hills.
Is there any kind of rule internally where when you put out a story and you find out that, hey, we got that wrong, that you make sure there's as big a story that's put out that says you got it wrong and that it gets
Yeah,
corrected
I
that
mean,
way?
if there's a story that needs a correction like that, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we will change a headline, we will do what we need to do, and then put it back toward the top of the website, you know, when that happens. But a lot of times it never happens. See, a lot of times they just let it lie, and they will not even call you. They may grouse about it, you know, maybe a publicist grouses about it to you, but they've never gotten back to the media outlet that they have the gripe with, because they don't want to deal with it. I mean, it's weird. You don't have to go to college to be a publicist. You don't have to get training to be a publicist. You just call yourself one.
You don't have anybody looking over your shoulder. That's for sure.
Yeah. And
Maybe the client.
and it's crazy that the way they run for the hills when there's a problem is just remarkable. And it is a remarkable thing. And if the clients knew that the publicists were doing this, I can't imagine that they would keep them on retainer. But it happens
Right.
so much. So I
But
don't know if this.
having represented a lot of news outlets in my day, right? I also think that whether or not you get a hold of the publicist or not, you still have a responsibility to try and verify the story as being accurate and correct. And you want to do that whether or not it's through the publicist or through anyone else. If you can't get a hold of anyone, you may look to a third party source, or you may try to get a lawyer to look and say, is this the right, do we have this right? Is this not right? I mean, I do think there's other ways to verify it. You want to make sure that you try your best to do it. And Harvey, I do know that you do reach out and you do that, and you do it yourself, which is actually amazing. I one time I thought there were 4 of you.
Listen, the mantra in my newsroom is side doors. Is that you go directly to get. I'll give you an example, and it's a funny story. We got an email from a. I'm just going to give you an example of a side door. There was a case this week where this farmer was in a bar in Florida, and he was getting drunk with these 3 guys. And he was saying he's going to lose his house. They needed to make money. And they knew he was a chicken farmer. So they started talking about how many eggs can a chicken hatch in a day. And they got in a big argument, and the farmer ended up firing shots at all 3 of the guys. Didn't hit anybody, but got arrested. So we saw a little bit of the video, and I wanted to get the video. So I told my producer, call the police and let's get the body cam, because there was body cam on this news station.
Of the shooting?
No, it was the aftermath. It was the aftermath of the shooting, but you see the farmer getting arrested and the whole thing. So the police didn't get back. So I said, okay, side doors, guys. So we looked up our Fox affiliate in that market. We called the affiliate. We asked them, did you do the story? Did you get the raw body cam? They did. We got the body cam. We got it up. So it's side doors. So when we deal with publicists, we always use these side doors to try and verify things. And usually, listen, I'll be honest with you. There are some publicists in this town we just don't trust, no matter what they say. And we'll always find other ways. Is there a friend of the person that they're talking about? Is there a spouse? Is there a business person? And we always use these maybe I'm talking too much, but we always use these side doors, and the side doors are usually more effective than the direct approach. Just the way
it's funny you talk about farmers. Yesterday, I spent the day in a mediation involving a cattle company and the farmland and a bank called Rabo Bank that does a lot of agricultural.
What a terrible
lending.
name for a bank, Rabo Bank.
Rabo Bank.
Yeah, look them up. There's a reason for that. You won't be surprised.
Okay.
More to come on that.
I love it. I love it. I was gonna. You come up with Rabobank. All I could think of is what a chicken shit story. But, there you go.
Anyway, listen, Bryan, thanks for hopping on. We so appreciate it. We love having you on.
Yeah, no,
You're the best.
both you guys are fantastic, and I love the podcast. So I'm going to try to be happy the rest of the day. You guys remain 2 angry men, and we'll talk later. Thank you.
Take my phone calls.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
See you guys later.